Hey, so this is a Micromaster MM-8000. It's made by Elenco or something like that, electronics, and it's a little single board computer. It was sold as a kit. It's more intended to be an educational board than I think a trainer. And because of that, some of the design decisions were kind of limiting as far as expansion goes. But for using what's available on the board, it's pretty decent design. This is the manual for it. I actually downloaded from the website. They still have it up. I don't know really when these were sold. It looks like somewhere in the early to mid 80s. And when you Google it, there's not much information out there. I did find a few forums from the early 2000s that were saying that people were finding them still available on websites. So I don't know if they were kits at that point or if people were just reselling already assembled kits. I would think that these devices would be pretty difficult to acquire at that point. So I'm not sure how they could have sold it that late. But yeah, so there's a Intel 8085 processor on it. It has this device here, which has 256 bytes of RAM. Plus it has 3 I/O ports, 2 8-bit and 1 6-bit. This is actually an EEPROM, which I think is kind of neat. It's 2K worth of memory, and yeah, you can program it through the switches, which is cool. There's a keypad and two 7-segment displays that are both interfaced through this I/O chip, so they won't do anything without a program. But these switches are configured in a way where they allow you to access the address and data bus directly. You only get 9 bits of the address bus. So this is an 8-bit processor, so you get your 8 bits for data, but you can only access the 9th bit of the address bus. In fact, the rest of the address bus, with exception to A15, don't even have pull-up resistors, so it's really not intended to be used outside of just kind of the things that are mapped on this board here. So there is an expansion port. It has 44 pins, I believe. It has all the address lines and enables and everything. So you can do something with that, which we'll look at in a little bit. So, like I said, this was a kit, so whoever bought it would have put it together. They have removed a few components, or somebody's removed some components of this over the years. So we're missing 3 switches. I have bought some switches on eBay. They won't be until next week, and I believe they'll fit right. I do have some switches. They're not the right size, but I might rig some of those on there. There's a lot of little jumpers on here. I'll have to go through and see how it's configured. See, those are open, and through those you can kind of choose what's enabled and what's disabled. And yeah, so I think what I'm going to do is go through the solder joints, make sure everything's good. It looks good on the bottom, most of them. The top, you can see, I don't think they quite got enough solder in the connections, and the reason I say that's because it didn't wick up to the top in most cases, which may or may not matter. With newer boards, it'd probably be fine, but if this was made back in the 80s, it's possible that the plating in the holes isn't very good, and putting enough solder on there to wick through the plating just guarantees that makes a good connection from the top to the bottom. So I do want to see if this thing works. This capacitor right here is missing, which this capacitor and that resistor are the clock for the 8085, so it definitely won't run without that. Like I said, I need to go through the jumpers and see how it's configured, and I need to come up with something for these 3 switches temporarily until I get the proper ones in. All the parts are, for the most part, installed good. I think these capacitors could be a little shorter, but yeah, they've been put down on the board like they're supposed to and everything. So I'm gonna go through this and see if we can power it up. I also don't have a power supply. This has got a 7805 regulator. I've got the schematic over here, and so the power's up here. nothing nothing goes to any chips on the board without going through the regulator first. So I think we can put about whatever we want on there. So I'll probably put 9 volts. We should get 5 volts to everything on the board, and should be able to at least flip some switches and see if things seem to work. So let me work on that and I'll be back. So I got some parts soldered in here. We got a capacitor there. I put a 22 picofarad. I think the let's see, that's C2. It said 20 picofarad, so that's the closest I had. I think I have enough jumpers in here to make it work. I didn't have any switches that fit. Like I said, I had some on order. These are some Radio Shack, you know, closeout cell switches. They're just a little too big, but I think I've got them in there good enough to test it. So let me see if I can find a power supply. Let's see if this thing does anything. I got 9 volts. So let's plug that in. Power switch is off. Let's see. Right enable's on. I think up is reset. Alright. We have some lights. If I go down. Well, if I go into reset, the lights get brighter. If I go down, they're definitely changing, so it looks like the processor's running. So if we're on address 0. Let's enable the ROM. Say read. Enable the RAM. Say read. Well, I mean, we got lights on. Nothing seems to be getting warm. I obviously don't know how this thing works, but it's a good sign so far. Yeah, reset definitely seems to change things. And it's delayed, so I'll switch it and it's like a delay and then lights change, so it looks like it's executing whatever's in ROM. So that's cool. So yeah, that looks good. Alright, well, I'm gonna play around with this and read the manual because I don't really know how any of it works, and if I get it doing something, I'll come back. Okay, so if I'm in reset, I've got the EPROM enabled. If I hold down read, see it says 0. So if I flip some switches and hit right and then read, even if I flip those switches down, those lights stay on. So it looks like I'm writing to this address. It just doesn't seem like any of the switches change the address. And if I instead go into RAM and do a read, it doesn't seem like it does anything. There we go. Okay, so set the address. Again, it's got these lights on. Yeah, those lights are on. If I write, let's say 3 and 4. Now if I say read, then 3 and 4 are on. So it looks like I'm not sure. It's like can you set the address, or maybe it just doesn't display the address. Well, let's see. So we're on 0 now. So we'll set the address, and we'll set it to 1. Right. Now if we read, so then let's go to address 1, set it, and let's set that to 2. Now if we read, we got 2. So go back down to address 0, set it, read. Yeah, see it's still on 2. I think it's just writing to this address. I'm not sure why that is. Maybe this address latch button's not working. Alright, so here on the schematic, so here's the processor. This is the ALE, the address latch pin. And you see there's a J10 jumper. That would, I guess, disable it. But I do not have that jumper in there. But that is a convenient place to measure it. So set the meter here. J10's right here. You see it pretty much has 0 volts. If I press it, it goes to 0.2 volts. If I let go, it goes back to 0. I'm pretty sure that needs to be going up to closer to 5, probably at least 4. Let's cut the reset off. Yeah, I wonder if reset's in the down position instead. Though it really seems like the clock's running. Yeah, see, we've got some segments up here. I think the clock's running here. Wonder how I made that come on before. I think all this is disabled whenever the processor's running. I think the way the circuit's set up, it uses resistors to pull all the pins up and down from the switches. So I think the microcontroller overrides it. I mean, the processor overrides it all. But yeah, so we're getting something. We'll keep working on it. So that place I was just checking is actually on the processor side of that signal. So if I actually look on this chip right here, which is the address latch for the EPROM, get it over here, and I press it, it's going up to 3 volts. I'm thinking that's what it's supposed to do based on the way they designed this. So I think the address latch is working. Maybe this doesn't reflect the address, though it doesn't seem to be storing in unique locations. So something's driving the address bus, or maybe something's driving the data bus all the time. So I'm going to start pulling out some chips and kind of see what makes that go away. So I think I'll start with the processor. I think that makes the most sense. Okay, so the processor's out. Let's cut it on now. We still have those lights on. Okay, so this is the EPROM, and that's the latch circuit for it. So this connects to the address, and also this, which is the I/O chip, connects to the address. This is the I/O chip that's supposed to go in here, I believe, and it also came with this one, which is a different type. So I don't know if there was something going on with that. So I'm going to remove that. Alright, still have the same ones on. All that's left is this. These are pull-ups. Maybe it just does cut on, but let's see. Like I say, I probably just need to read the manual, figure out what it's actually supposed to do. But I would expect those lights to reflect the switch when it's in reset mode. Yeah, still nothing. I don't think it can be that, because that's not actually attached to the address lines. Though it is attached to the data lines. So might as well pull that one out too, why not? Okay, still on. So it doesn't seem to be anything to do with those chips. Let's see here. Those lights should only be on if the address buses are high. And the address buses are only pulled high if the switches are on, it looks like. So let's check that. What's the part number of that? Doesn't actually say. That is IC6. That doesn't actually list them by numbers, by IDs. Well, IC6 is here. That's a SIM4 LS04. Yeah, it's a hex inverter. Okay, so see if the pinout's right. Looks like 5 volts is on 14. That's right. Ground's on 7. 1 to 2. Yeah, 3 to 4. Okay. So let's see. 14 should be 5 volts. 7 should be ground. 1 is 1 volt. And we got 0.2 on the output. And the switches do not seem to be modifying the output. So let's see if we get anything here. That's 5 volts. So if I actually measure pin on the switch, you see it's at 1 volt when it's off, and it's at 3.5 volts when it's on. But if I go to address 1 on the LED, it stays at 1 volt. Let me make sure it's not just a different switch. Okay, so that's address 5, so they're just not in order. So it's going from 1 to 3.5, and our output is staying at 0.2 no matter what. So it's suggesting that 3.5 is not enough to trigger that. Or the 1 volt isn't low enough to cut it off. Yeah, it just doesn't say what I see it is. So that was a 74 HC04 or LS04. So what's the book have on its parts lifts? HC04. You know, that would make a difference because between the HC and the LS series, they do have different thresholds. I don't know if that's it. I'll have to look that up. What's this one? That's an HC chip. It's the ones I pulled out. What's this latch? The latch is an HC chip. Yeah, that's the only one that's an LS chip. So that if that's what it is, that kind of makes sense because when we read the data, it did work. But when you read the data, I think it actually goes pretty much full swing, voltage to voltage. You know, 5 to ground. But whenever we're using the switches, it only goes from 1 to 3. So let me see if I have a HC chip we can stick in there. Well, unfortunately, I didn't find a replacement for this, but I mean, this is these 2 pins right here are go to switch number 1. So my ground lead off. All right. So it's definitely going from 1 to 3.5, which should be able to cut it on and off. The problem, I think, it's not having trouble cutting on because the light's on. It's having trouble cutting off. And the problem, I think, is it's not going low enough because it actually needs to go. It said 0.8 was the maximum off voltage for the nut. So let's look at the 74HC04. Yeah, so the low level for the 74HC04 at 4.5 volts is 1.35. Yeah, so it has a much higher cutoff voltage. So that's the problem. It's just always on. It's always triggering it. So that it looks like the LS chip will not work for this application.
So somebody must have replaced that. So let me look again and see if I have an HC chip. Alright, I thought I bought one of these a while back. So there's one there. I don't know if these are, knockoff chips or whatever. Got them on eBay. But there is an HC04. Should be right there. 74HC04. So let me stick that in there. Hopefully these lights will follow the switches. Okay, 74HC installed. The lights are off. Yeah, now they cut on with the switches. See if they all work. One doesn't. It's probably because I extended these leads on the switch. We're getting 3.5 there. Alright, so that's going to AD6. So, alright, AD6 and 7 go to a different device. And this is one of these, which is a NAND gate. So pin 5 should have 5 volts on it. 2, 3, 4, 5. It's got 4.8. Pin 4 should follow the switch. I'm not sure if the switch is intermittent or if it's my connection. Yeah, I think I just wasn't holding it on there good. And the output is on pin 6. So 4, 5, 6. It's changing a little bit when I switch it, but it's definitely not working. So that might be a bad chip too. 7 does work, and 7 also goes into it. So let's look. That's pins. 1 should be 4.8 volts. 2 should be connected to the switch, which it is. And then pin 3 should be the output, which it is. So once again, 5 goes to 4.8 volts. 6 is the output. That's only going to 3.5. What was this other one going to? Yeah, same thing. And then the output from that is on pin 6. And that's not working. So this chip's also bad. That's not a good sign so far. Okay, so I've used 2 of my assorted kit chips. So let's see now. Yeah, that switch is intermittent, but it's working now. These were, I think I said before, I got them from Radio Shack when they were closing, so they're pretty old. Try spraying some deoxid in them. I don't know. They're just not as nice as switches as these other ones. These are really clicky. These are more smooth sliding switches, and I think they're just too cheap. Seems to have a dead spot because you move it forward, it cuts on, then it cuts back off. So it's on, then it's off. Yeah, if you go all the way forward, it doesn't actually stay on. It's just not a good switch. Well, anyways, hopefully the ones that I bought on eBay to replace them are better. Okay, well, let's put some chips back in. Cut the power off. Let's try the ROM first. And we'll also need this address latch. Okay, make sure I got them in the right way. I think so. Okay, so if we go to 0, hit address latch, we'll set it to 1, and hit write. Then let's go to address 1, hit address light, set it to 2, and hit write. So now if we go back to 0, address latch, read, we'll get nothing. Yeah, I don't know if that's working or not. Oh, I have to enable ROM. We have to cut the chip select pin on. Okay, there we go. So all the switches are off. Address latch, we'll set it to 1 and hit write. So now if we read, yeah, I don't know if that's working or not. I think when you read, you should see the value stored in there. Got enable ROM, we got write enable. I think everything's right. Here, let's go to address 1, address latch. We'll set it to 2. We'll say write. Go back to address 1. Say read. Maybe latch it and then read. Yeah, I don't think that's working. Okay. Let's take that one out. Let's put the RAM in. I don't know if these require the microcontroller to work. They may. Yeah, that's right. So that one goes that way. Alright, so I realized I had my reset switch in the wrong position, but I'm still not getting anything out of the RAM chip. So I'm going to take it out. Because when we first started this, when the lights weren't working right, I was getting some activity. It seemed like something was working, and I'm guessing that it's the ROM, the EPROM chip, and that it's just because I didn't have the reset switch set properly a moment ago. But I'm going to try that one more time, and if that doesn't work, then I think we need to put the processor in there, because I was getting some response initially. Power on. We are in reset. Let's read. I don't know if address 0 is actually. Anyway, we'll go to address 1. We'll set the address. So it should be latched in here now. And then we will write that value to it. And then let's read. Yeah, just not getting anything. Okay, I think I see what it is. So if we go to pin 9, that's the input to the latch. You can see it's going with a switch. Pin 12 is the output from the latch, but you see it shouldn't be following the switch. it should be latched. It should only latch to whatever the switch is if you hit this ALE button. So this is the latch input. See, it's 1.8 volts. If I press it, it goes to 5. So I was looking at here to see what actually pulls it down. The ALE button has a pull up, but there's nothing to actually pull it down, except for it has this 1K going to the processor. So I bet the processor pulls that pin down, and that 1.1K is what's actually supposed to bring it to ground. So that's probably why nothing's working, because the processor probably is required to be in there to make that work. So let me install the processor. Okay, so let's look at that now. So now we have 0 volts on it, and it goes to 3 volts when we press it, which is more in line with what everything else is doing. So pin 9, we can cut it on and go to 3.5. If we check the output, it does not follow. So now if I press latch, it should change to 5 and stay there. Okay, so that's working now. So let's go to address 1. Let's set the address latch, read it. There's nothing on there. Set a couple things. Write. Now let's read. Yep, still not working. I just realized I made the same mistake again. Enable ROM. Address latch. Now let's set some data in there. We'll say write, cut it off, and read. And there we go. There's our data. So now we can go to a different address, set the address, put in some different data, write. Now we can read it. So if we go back to our original, read, set that address, read. Okay, so the ROM chip's working. So let's go back and check the RAM now. Okay, so we will enable RAM, set the address, we'll set it to 1. We'll do a read. There's random stuff in there. Let's cut these. Actually, let's do some different ones in case it's doing the wrong chip. We'll do a write, cut them off, and then do a read. Let's go to a different address, set the address, do a write, and do a read. Let's go back to the first address, do a read, second address, do a read. Okay, so all that's working now. And like I said, the processor's definitely running. Oh, well, I think our ROM's empty. It was blinking lights and stuff before, so I assume it's doing something. Yeah, I had an enable switch on. Yeah, I don't know. I assume it's doing something. The processor's probably working, I guess, but we're not gonna know unless we actually write a program. So but anyways, looks like everything's working now. Just had a couple bad chips on there, and then me being an idiot. So let me play around with this a little more and see if I can do a little test program. So I found another issue. If I enable the RAM chip and cut on I/O, set the address 0, which is the control bit. That's where you set the directions of all the I/O stuff. And I hit read, that pin's on. But if I write stuff to it, it doesn't seem to respond. And that's the same thing with the other registers in I/O. So I'm wondering if there's something wrong with that chip, because it came with this one too. This isn't the same thing, but it's a similar type device. I looked up the datasheet of this part, and it is basically the same thing, but the chip enable pin is reversed, so you'd have to go high on this. I'm not sure if that's what this jumper over here does, but anyways, I was trying to read the data I was inputting into register 0, and it actually returns the status instead of what you wrote in register 0. But still, whenever I try to go to the other registers and change them, I'm not getting any output. So I'm going to go back and read the datasheet on this, see if I can figure that out. I looked up the datasheet, and it looks like I think I'm doing it right. I don't know if I can actually read status registers on the I/O ports or not, because they don't seem to be responding to anything I'm giving them. But I am measuring the voltages coming out of it, and they're just not changing. So anyways, I ordered a few of these. So they're coming from California, so it'll be another week. So in a week I'll have this and the switches, so I can kind of fix this thing up a little bit. But yeah, I guess that's it. I was just kind of giving an overview of this thing and getting it working. It looks like everything's working fine, so that's good. If anybody knows anything about these or has had one before or used one, let me know in the comments. I don't know anything about it. It's just not a lot of information on the internet. Might have mentioned MSI Guy has a few videos on it. But that's about it. So I might go back and watch his videos and see how he got these working. I know that earlier when we were messing with it, these lights, one of these did light up, which would suggest that it might work, but may just be doing something wrong. But I'll keep playing with it throughout the week, and we'll get some new parts in and take another look at it. So thanks for watching.